Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 10th of March of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the Sudzha direction, where the Russians continue their counter-offensive operation. As you can see, we have another day, significant number of different icons from this territory. We have significant changes on the ground. The Russians during the previous 24 hours managed to improve their positions significantly by taking under control up more than 6 settlements. Just 6 settlements were recaptured by the Russians by the morning of the 10th of March, and the sources are saying that by the evening of the 10th of March, few more settlements came under complete Russian control. But before we start discussing all these things in details, I would like to discuss with you once again the Russian special legendary, it's already legendary offensive operation through pipelines. Today, one Russian resource, more precisely the executor, probably the organizer, the commander of this offensive group, gave us first details and insights about this operation. Exactly the person who was responsible for this operation gave us the first statements about this offensive operation. He stated that more than 5 different units were involved in this operation from different sides, from different group of forces of the armed force of Russian Federation. Furthermore, he stated that the Russians used more than around 800 soldiers. Just imagine yourself, the Russians managed to concentrate 2 battalions, 800 soldiers inside of these pipelines. And also he stated that the Russians, these soldiers had been waiting for 4 days before they received the order to begin offensive operation and to come out from inside of those pipelines. So imagine yourself 800 Spartans or 800 Sudzhans left the pipelines on the 4th day after they concentrated themselves in this area and began their offensive operation. And according to information we have, those 800 Spartans or 800 Sudzhans first attacked the northeastern part of the Sudzha agglomeration. We're talking about this industrial zone and about this intersection of roads. And when the Russians managed to take this territory under complete control, the most important, and first of all, they managed to cut the settlements and Ukrainian contingents on the territory of Martinovka, Mikhailovka, Cherkasskaya Porечная, Pravda from supply and support. And when that happened, the Ukrainians were forced to begin retreat process. They were forced to begin withdrawing their positions without anything, without taking a look on other positions and without taking care about what is going to happen next. So you know that obviously this is that was the legendary operation, but you know that this is not just about 300 Spartans or 800 Sudzhans. It's not about them. The title to this video has the name of 800 Sudzhans or the Sudzhan horse. You know that this offensive operation, this special operation, reminds me not just the legendary legend about 300 Spartans. This operation reminds me also another very interesting and very let's say very interesting ancient special operation by the name of the Trojan horse. You know, the Russians used those pipelines, and you know that Zelensky is responsible basically for this operation. Zelensky is responsible for failure on this direction because right before the 2025, Zelensky and the Ukrainian authorities decided to cancel the transportation of gas through the territory of Ukraine from Russia to some European countries like Slovakia and Hungary. The Ukrainians was the side that cut this agreement and stopped transportation of gas from Russia to the European countries. Basically, Zelensky is responsible that by the time when the Russians began this offensive operation, that Trojan horse or Trojan pipeline offensive operation, he was responsible that these pipelines were completely empty without any gas. So this is the situation, and this is the reality, and this is is probably very interesting and very funny joke carried out by the Russian side. Once again, as a result of this Trojan pipeline offensive operation, the Russians managed to land their 800 Spartans or Sudzhans behind the Ukrainian positions, which in the end led to complete collapse of Ukrainian defense and complete defeat for the armored forces of Ukraine, at least on the eastern, northern and the southern flanks of the Sudzha agglomeration or the Sudzha pocket. Now let's discuss in details the changes that we can see right now in front of your screens. And first let's talk about the eastern direction, about the territory where 800 Sudzhans landed. According to information we have, the Russians by the end of the 10th of March, according to official statements, managed to take under complete control the settlement by the name of Ivashkovsky and the settlement of Cherkasskaya Porечная. In this video that was geolocated from the territory of Ivashkovsky, we can see one Russian soldier that was moving through the street, and based on this video we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. Furthermore, we got a lot of videos. We start receiving a lot of videos when the sun rises. We start receiving lots of videos of prisoners of war and different vehicles and equipment that were captured by the Russians as a result of this offensive operation. In this video, for example, we can see how the Russians were evacuating the US Abrams completely with undamaged as a result of this Sudzha offensive operation or Trojan pipeline special operation. Furthermore, during the day we got a lot of videos with flags. The Russians were raising their flags almost on every single street. They managed to secure and to capture as a result of the last wave of offensive operation. This video we got from the settlement of Martinovka. Another Russian soldier on the roof of some building in the central part of the settlement was waving with the Russian flag. Based on this video and based on the reports of the Minister of Defense and the Group of Forces North, we have colored these territories in Russian favor. Yesterday in the evening, on the 9th of March, we at least received two videos from the settlement of Malaya Loknya. In this video we can see how another Russian soldier on the highest construction in this area was waving with the Russian flag. Another video took place a bit to the southeast from the original position. In this video we can see 6 Russian soldiers that were waving with the signs and the flags of Russian Federation and of those units that were involved in the offensive operation in this part. As you can see, a lot of icons, a lot of prisoners of war, a lot of confirmed changes, a lot of unconfirmed changes, and the most important, during the day we got a lot of videos how the Ukrainians were retreating and withdrawing their positions. In this video, for example, we can see a huge concentration of the armored force of Ukraine that was located along the tree lines, and most likely they were waiting for their orders. We discussed that the Sudzhan Spartans were waiting, 800 Sudzhans were waiting the order to begin offensive, and in this video we can see several hundreds of Ukrainians that were waiting completely opposite order to begin retreat or withdrawing process. And after the Ukrainians left this territory, according to different sources, the Russians managed to secure this territory completely. We're talking about the settlements like Mirny, like the settlements like Bondaryovka, Kalmakov. So all these territories, as you can see, according to different mappers, very reliable, by the way, mappers and sources managed to secure this territory. As you can see, according to geolocations and the number of icons, the biggest activities during the previous 24 hours, offensive activities, let's call it like this, took place exactly on the eastern part of the Sudzha. When talking about the northeastern, the Russians were just clearing the territories that were abandoned by the Ukrainians. As for the northern part, we saw the same picture. The Russians were clearing the territories that were abandoned by the Ukrainians. The main fighting activities took place exactly in the eastern part. Furthermore, and probably the most important thing, is that also during the previous 24 hours we got the first videos that where we can see huge number of Ukrainians that were crossing the border between the Russian Federation and the border in Ukraine. In this video we can see how those Ukrainians who managed to save their lives, but telling the truth, it's very difficult to say who probably is the luckiest. These guys that managed to cross the border between Sudzha and between the territory of Ukraine, or those Ukrainians that were captured by the Russians on the territory of Ivashkovsky. I believe that when talking about these guys that were captured on the territory of Ivashkovsky, we can say that maybe the next several days are going to be very hard and very difficult for them, but obviously in 2, 3, 4 days everything will be finished for them. Of course they will be considered as a prisoners of war for several months, weeks or years until the end of the special military operation, but when talking about these guys that abandoned and left their positions on the territory of Sudzha, as for them everything just begins, because most likely after the fall of Sudzha the Russians will continue their offensive operation, and most likely we are going to see lots of clashes on the territory of Sumy region. And you know that today a lot of pro-Russian experts began making projections and speculations on this topic as well. In this video we can see another group of Ukrainian forces that were running away from the territory of Sudzha in the direction of the border. So when talking about all these videos, the first things that comes to our mind is that Ukrainians are not planning to defend the city of Sudzha, and they will try to escape from this area as soon as possible, as soon as the first possibility occurs in their hands. So this is the situation in this area. Zelensky was completely defeated in this territory. I believe I remind you that tomorrow they're going to be meeting between the group of negotiators from Ukraine and the United States of America on the territory of Saudi Arabia. And during this meeting, the parties are going to discuss, according to first insights, the situation with the territorial losses from the Ukrainian side, what can they accept or not. But due to this significant defeat on the territory of Sudzha, most likely the Ukrainians will be forced to accept everything, including abandoning their positions and withdrawing their positions from this pocket as well, if the Ukrainians are able to hold these territories until the end of the negotiation process. Because when talking about how the things are developing right now, most likely the Ukrainians will not be able to hold their positions in the Sudzha direction until the end of the negotiation process. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the northern Kupiansk direction. According to information we have, during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians continued their counter-offensive operation in this area between the settlements of Sinkovka and Liman Pershi in the river Voskol, and according to pro-Ukrainian sources, as a result of this counter-offensive operation, the Ukrainians managed to improve their position significantly. Basically, the Ukrainians restore control over the settlement of Petropavlovka and restore control at least over 60 or 50% of the settlement of Sinkovka. We understand this operation. The main target of the Ukrainians is to enter as deep as possible towards the settlement of Liman Pershi, and this will allow the Ukrainians to cut the Russians that are currently located on the Ukrainian side of the river Voskol from supplying support. And if Ukrainians are able to do this, sooner or later they will force the Russians to fall back from this territory, or they will force the Russians to introduce additional forces in this area with the purpose to stabilize the situation. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the city of Toretsk. The Russians, after first several days of Ukrainian successful attempts of counter-offensive operation, managed to stabilize the situation. Of course, that the Russians paid significant price for this stabilization, and now step by step the Russians began their own counter-offensive operation with the purpose to restore control over territories they lost during Ukrainian offensive. For example, we have small adjustments on map in the vicinity of the stadium. In this video we can see how the Ukrainians were bombing and attacking the Russian stormtroopers that were recapturing lost territories. Another video we got in the Zabalka district. Here we could see the same story. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Pokrovsk direction, where we can see very heavy clashes on the territory of the settlement by the name of Shevchenka. As you can see, during the previous 24 hours we got a lot of icons from this area. By the end of the 8th of March, these territories territories were considered as the territories under complete Russian control, and several territories on the northern part as a contested area. But now, by the end of the 10th of March, we have no doubts that the northern territories are under complete Ukraine control. During the previous 24 hours, we got lots of videos of close combat between the Russians and the Ukrainians in the central part of the settlement. The Ukrainians were attacking, the Russians were counter-attacking, and both the Ukrainian and the Russian FPV drones were attacking each other. The significant losses currently suffer both sides, the Russians and the Ukrainians. As for now, we see the battle for initiative. Currently, we can say whether the Russians or the Ukrainians are going to get as winners from this battle. Now let's discuss the situation in the Bogatyr direction today. The Ukrainian sources, more precisely Deep State, published very interesting article regarding the situation in this area. The Ukrainians reported that the settlement of Constantinople is under the control of the defense forces of Ukraine. Despite the statements of the Russian Federation and the Russian military, the city of Constantinople is still under the control of defense forces. I'll remind you that yesterday pro-Russian resources published probably 4 or 5 videos from the most southwestern part, central, and the most northwestern part of the settlement, where the Russian soldiers, completely without any resistance from the Ukrainian side, were establishing flags all over the entire settlement. Based on this video and based on the report of the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation, most of the mappers and military experts adjusted their maps in the Russian favor. And probably we don't need any more proofs, let's say, to color the territory of the settlement in the Russian favor. But today the Ukrainians reported that all these flags were established by sabotage and reconnaissance group. So we say that they managed somehow the Russians managed to infiltrate this territory, and then they were destroyed. But obviously it sounds like a fairy tale. Of course, from Ukrainians should have published some videos with their flags if they wanted these territories to be colored back in Ukrainian favor. As for the Zaporozhye direction, during the previous 24 hours, nothing special happened. So tomorrow is the beginning of another round of the negotiation process, and we see that Ukrainians are going to start this negotiation process with a very probably limited cards. They don't have cards at all, and the Russians are going to start this process with a very powerful card, and this is the card of the counter-offensive operation in the Sudzha area. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.